Hi, I'm Mona Shanae, and welcome to the very first Pet Matters feature on West Kent Radio. Joining me today is Joe Sutherland, a qualified veterinarian nurse from Pet Professionals. In this first of a series, we'll be discussing on what you can consider in choosing a pet and how you can find the right companion for your lifestyle.
Would love you to introduce yourself because we all have furry friends or around furry friends, and you are the pet professional.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name's Joanna Sutherland, and I am a qualified veterinary nurse, behaviourist, and my special interests are nutrition and also mental stimulation in pets. I have had pets from chinchillas and looked after people's rabbits and right through to obviously dogs and cats.
Well, that's incredible because they all bring us joy, and we regard animals as our everyday companions. So you're in the right place because everyone's interested. But with that said, I was just wondering, how does one choose the right pet?
Absolutely. It's a really important question. And I think for me, we actually at Pet Professionals offer a service where you can have a session with someone like myself to discuss what options there are. I think the first thing they need to do is to research and find out about time, capacity, as well as the cost of the pet that they are most interested in. And it might be that that's not going to be the best fit and they have to rethink.
What are some of the things that you consider? Because most people feel that they should always get a kitten or a puppy or versus a rescue animal.
Generally, I would always say consider rescue first. There are pros and cons of both, and I feel that both have their place. As a puppy school tutor, I specialize in puppies, and actually, puppies and kittens are exhausting. As cute as and as lovely as they are exhausting. And if you've got a family, it may seem like a great idea, but puppies are very mouthy, they've got very sharp teeth. So, actually, considering a rescue pet that you're not going to have to go through that sort of challenging life phase, not to mention the sleepless nights, is something to be valued. And obviously, there are so many pets that end up in rescue for lots of reasons. So it's not something to be concerned about. It's definitely something to look into.
What advice would you give to anyone who is deciding between a dog, a cat, a rabbit, and as you mentioned, you had a chinchillas? How do
Yes.
you decide on all of those?
Look at the lifespan of the pet and look at what you are planning to do with your life. And obviously, we can't see into the future, but rough idea of future plans, what you might want to be doing, and also to look at the cost. I think the biggest problem is getting a pet and not being able to give them enough time. Or not having the funds. And rabbits, really can be extremely expensive, almost as expensive as cats and dogs, if, the care is where it should be. So more kind of for adults, actually, I feel rabbits are a better pet. So it's just looking at all those different aspects and doing proper research before you choose. And you might be surprised what pet comes forth. One of my chinchillas lived to 26 years old. So I have pictures of them chewing up my maths GCSE coursework right through to them being in my first home. So that's a serious commitment if you're thinking about something like that, especially for a child.
You mentioned the magical word of commitment, and as you know, every pet has an expense, the time and energy. What would you recommend for a busy professional?
Absolutely. Whether, if we're working 9 to 5 or if we're working sometimes from home and then, which a lot of people do nowadays, but then they might have to commute somewhere to London, for example, and be out for the day. So you've got to look at how you're going to provide for them if your dog or your cat, if you're going to have that sort of pet. There are lots of things that are out there to support. But I would always question about how long we're leaving a pet and how much time they're actually spending with a professional, people like ourselves who do sort of puppy pop-ins, and whether a different pet would be more suitable. So something like for adults, I think house rabbits are amazing. Obviously, they need outside exercise and they need to be in more than, one. Normally, a pair or, is better. But they have that companionship of each other during the day. And obviously, you can be with them in the mornings and the evenings. So that's a really nice pet to consider. They are very communicative rabbits. And as I say, they can be quite costly. So a professional that's got a full wage is going to be the right pet for them potentially.
That's a lot to consider because you would think that a rabbit just goes off into the corner, but obviously that's not so. With that said, what are some of the breeds that people make mistakes in bringing their home?
Yeah, I think people quite often I see are drawn to, particularly with dogs, but also with cats, that to breeds that they've seen either in movies, social media, TV, and that is not necessarily the right, breed for them. The other thing that commonly happens is more of a sort of anthropomorphic approach where people are drawn to dogs that have very round eyes that look like babies. It's important to really look at those breeds and what their needs are, especially for exercise and mental stimulation, so you don't end up having problem behavior, which is really, once that's arrives, it's complex to resolve. It's not something you can deal with quickly.
You mentioned something very key because puppy eyes don't stay puppy eyes forever.
Yes.
What are some of the common breeds that people do make the mistakes in thinking, oh, it's a cute puppy, and it ends up being a totally different looking and acting animal?
I think most puppies in general, whatever the breed is, are appealing just because they're cute. But I think, your typical wide-eyed breeds, so you'll have your Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, but also your French Bulldogs and your Boston Terriers. And those sorts of breeds do need a little bit more specialist, knowledge, I would say. Yeah. A Cavalier, a little bit more general, and they're a great family pet, but they do have some health concerns. That obviously something else to consider when you're looking at any breed, is to make sure that you do your research on their medical conditions and make sure that the breeder has tested for those to reduce that chance.
I guess it's about really the compatibility of lifestyle and also to the breed. Not everyone has a suitable environment. What would you say for a person who has a home, or I would say a larger home versus an apartment?
So as long as you can accommodate their needs, there's an option for a wide variety of choice. But you also need to be sensible. A Great Dane in a really small flat, they're just going to send that coffee flying off the table and everything's just going to get broken. But there are ways around things. If your lifestyle fits, but perhaps your house is a bit smaller, you can compensate by increasing mental stimulation and making sure that dogs get out and get lots of exercise and socialization. And then they're going to come home and have a nice sleep. So there are workarounds, but absolutely, it's something to consider. So, for example, I always tend to be sort of working gun dogs, and currently I have a Cavapoo because my lifestyle changed, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to provide, have the right breed for what I could offer in relation to time and energy and exercise and that sort of thing.
That brings me to a thought. I always do that lookup about personalities and on the internet, because it's very hard to choose when you're stuck on a breed based off of someone saying, if you're athletic and you go out, then you choose this one. What do you say about that?
You're completely right. It's important to start with that information and do that research and take that on board. So we're looking at breed specific traits. So if you're a runner, you might want a breed like a Dalmatian that likes to run, but you've got to look at the breed as a whole. And then even when we're talking about breed specific traits, you're going to have variations within that breed. So personality might vary slightly from one end to another, but breed traits are a good place to start. What was the dog originally bred to do? So what are the behaviors that are going to interest them? Do they like to swim? Do they like to run? But then you're going to get different personality. So for example, if you were to pick something like a border collie, they're quite happy to get out and get some exercise, and they love that. But they're so fiercely clever that they also need so much more than just that large amount of exercise. They're going to need that mental stimulation. They're going to need that training, or you're going to, as I say, tip into potentially behavior problems. So it's looking at it holistically, taking the breed traits, as you say, the sort of general personality traits, but then looking also at things like how much mental stimulation they're going to need as well.
I see. And that mental stimulation varies for tolerance. So, what do you say about when people have children already? Should it start at a puppy? Should the dog be a little bit older? How is that adjustment? What would you recommend to families who are introducing puppies, or even a rescue dog, to a family that already has small children?
So obviously, something important to note is that dogs kind of see children as different entities. They don't necessarily, when you look at a dog, a puppy's just a very bouncy version of the adult. When you look at humans, we're very different from babies to toddlers to young children to teenagers with the hormones and everything. So it's important that the rescue dog has ideally had socialization with children of the age that you're going to be bringing them and introducing them to, so you know they're going to be sound around them. And if you have puppy and you're bringing them in, there are some really important boundaries, particularly with young children. So the most common problem I see, obviously puppies are nippy and mouthy because that's how they play with each other. It takes quite a long time to teach puppies to not be mouthy because it's going against a natural behavior. So we need to make sure that there's an element of calm in the house. I know it's exciting to have a puppy, but puppy needs time to sleep. That's one of the key problems I see. The mouthiness will get worse if the puppy is not left alone and it's constantly being cuddled by the children. So I think having a family meeting before the puppy arrives, making sure the children are involved in, buying the things that the puppy's going to need, but also putting those boundaries in early. If the puppy is in their crate or their space, that's their rest time, can be really useful. And training and things like that. Dogs can get very frustrated, anxious, they can get low self-esteem if the training isn't the same, if there's the children are doing one thing and the adults are doing something else. So it's great to get the children involved. In fact, it's vital, but always under parental supervision, and make sure everybody's using the same words, the same hand signals, that sort of thing.
That's a family effort, that's for sure. And what
Yes.
happens when a family or a person has another animal? How do you suggest to deal with that?
Yeah, so I have a cat and a dog. And actually my cat she's a rescue cat. She was raised by my Labrador, so she's kind of dog in her behavior. But it's really important to consider the existing pets in the home. And it might be that you just need to wait, that it isn't going to be appropriate. It's better for the pet that you've got to not be having to deal, especially if you've got perhaps an older cat and you want to bring a puppy into the house. It might be better to wait. But obviously you can get advice from your veterinary surgery and online about from the kennel club and places to look at the right breed, to look at the way to introduce, and advice from professionals like myself before introducing it, because the internet's a funny thing. There can be quite a lot of misleading information. It can be very confusing. And the other thing that people can do is they'll try one thing and maybe not for long enough, and then they'll try something else. And actually getting the right advice, for example, introducing a dog to a cat that's existing in the house, or cat to another cat in the house, getting professional advice from a behaviorist will make sure that you have the best chance for it to go well.
On that note, I'd like to just ask you about the aspect of dealing with predatory and instinctive behavior. Where do you draw the line as into this is not a good deal versus I should keep on trying?
Absolutely. I think if you're starting to see stress behaviors in either the existing pet or the pet that's arrived, obviously there's breed differences and obviously with the species difference between cats. But if you're starting to see stress responses, or even before that, if there's no forward motion with the relationship and you are doing everything that your qualified or accredited expert has advised, then it's important that what we don't do is create behavior problems, because that's then harder for those pets to be rehomed. So if we've left it to the point where, for example, a dog's now being reactive and aggressive in any way, then that's going to be incredibly hard to find a new home. It can go both ways. It might be the cat's bullying the puppy. That happens that way too. So yeah, so looking out for signs of stress and just being prepared, absolutely, when you're choosing to do this, that maybe it's not going to work. And what are you going to do if that happens? Yeah.
Well, thanks, Joe. It's a lot to consider. Thank you for your time. And until next time, make sure that everyone, I would say, look into what they're buying and what they're purchasing and what animal is going to be brought into the home before they just bring it on to the dominant animal or just the family overall.
Yes, absolutely.
Join me next month on Pet Matters when Joe Sutherland returns to talk about understanding pet behavior and how to better interpret your pet's action and needs. In the meantime, if you're considering getting a pet or know someone who is, I hope today's conversation has been useful. Please share what you've learned with friends and family. I'm Mona Shanae, and we'll see you next time on Pet Matters.